So we're going to talk a little bit about accountability today, which is one of our key behaviors. And the history of this for me and for the leadership team starts with Tim Solso, at least for me. It really started to get with Tim trying to figure out how he was going to change the culture at Cummins to still be stakeholder related, still be thinking about communities and employees as well as financial results, but to dramatically improve financial results. Because the challenge is that we had come off a period when he became CEO where we had not really delivered terrific financial results. And so we went from this idea of best efforts to delivering results. And that's really what he was trying to get at, is I want to keep all those good values and how we treat people, but I want us to be focused on we must deliver results or we won't be the ones running the company. In fact, our company won't be around. And I think that became kind of the underpinning of our accountability thinking at that point. He called it a performance ethic at the time. We have an idea that we will do what we said we will do. We will have high performance irrespective of all the circumstances, as opposed to the circumstances being ways to explain why you didn't do it. So I think that became, and since it was such a big deal to him and such a big deal at the time, it kind of became the way that Rich and myself and Jill and all of our colleagues, this is what we thought accountability meant. And we went through all these, the changes in the company and the performance improved, and that was all really good. But as we began to write plans and strategies, and I was, again, a CFO at first and then later in PowerGen, what I found out was that the more we told people you have to hit your numbers no matter what, the lower the numbers came in. And I, as a CFO, I was watching people give me very low numbers. Like when you added up their numbers, the sum of them, essentially the shareholders should immediately sell your company because the sum of them was way worse than the stock price. Way worse. And like, well, we can't say that because if we say that, they'll just say, well, never mind then. They were hitting their numbers that they said. It's just that nobody cares because they're too low. And then we got into this big discussion about so I would go into their numbers and say, well, why did you put that? Because that's way too low. It's way too conservative. And they'd explain to me why the assumption, as conservative it was reasonable. They just didn't feel like we were all standing up and say, this is what our shareholders deserve or our employees deserve, and this is what we're going to deliver. So because of this challenge, when it came time to write accountability definition, I decided I was not going to pull one out of a book. And so the leadership team was all engaged in trying to figure out what is this definition. And you'll see as I tell it to you, it won't sound like hit your numbers or else. Or you can give me 10% more. Because of course hit your numbers or else means we should be firing people regularly for missing their numbers. And by the way, half of our team, when I asked them what does accountability mean, said it means hitting your numbers or else. And I said, okay, well, how many people have we or you fired in the last 5 years for missing their numbers? And no one could name one person. One person. So even though we were all assuming that was what we meant, we actually hadn't fired anybody for that. We had fired people for being inappropriate, for not doing values, but we had never fired anybody that we could. There must be somebody, but we couldn't come up with any names in that room of people we'd fired for missing their numbers. So many of us were under the assumption that was our accountability. That's what performance ethic meant. We fire people who miss, and yet if that was it, we weren't really living up to it. And we started off with the first behavior we were looking for everybody was to proactively assume personal responsibility. And some key words in there are proactively. And when you're going to be proactive, it means that you're not waiting for somebody to assign you something. You're not submitting the least challenging annual operating plan that you can get away with. So proactive responsibility means we all step up to take responsibility and we are clear on the problem we're trying to solve. What is it we're trying to do? And again, can't emphasize enough how often it is that as a leadership team, when we're not doing this right, it's because we haven't clearly defined what problem we're trying to solve. In fact, we all have a different idea in our head about what we're trying to. So to be a proactive, accountable person, you have to be ready to stand up and say the problem you're trying to solve, get alignment on that, and then you need to be ready to step up and say, I will be part of that solution. I will stand up and do it. And let me just give you one example from my past that stands out in my mind like no other for an example of proactive accountability. We had, as a leadership team, we were really struggling with IT implementations, and especially our ERP or our Oracle implementations that were going across the company. We were spending literally hundreds of millions of dollars per year. We weren't getting good results for it. And it was kind of dissociated from our basic strategy and operations. And there was nobody was really taking ownership for the whole problem. Yes, there were IT leaders who were doing their thing, and there were operations and supply chain people doing their thing, but nobody was taking ownership. And basically, it looked like the problem was the other guys most of the time. Whichever group you were in, it was the other guys that were really the problem. And when Lisa Yoder was on my team as a supply chain leader, one of the reasons she made it to my team as a supply chain leader is because she always exemplified personal accountability to me. She always would step up and say, I got that. And sure enough, she stepped up and said, I'll lead this ERP implementation. In fact, the whole supply chain IT side, I'll lead that for you. And for the team, really. I'll take it on. And then I asked her, so what's your plan? She goes, I have no idea. No idea what my plan is for how to do it, but it needs to be done. And I have, I've been in supply chain, I've done some IT implementations. I probably have the best shot as anybody, so I'll do it. That is what I mean by proactive responsibility. She had no idea how she was going to do it. And by the way, it wasn't going to go well. You probably know that, right? It's not going to be win after win after win. It's not going to be like that. But it needed to be done. And while everybody else kind of slipped their chair back, she just slipped her chair forward and said, I'll do it. That's what we need to be thinking about. And I would just say that even for the person that isn't stepping up to be the very first leader, like I'll be the number one, each member of the team has to say, what else could I do to help resolve this problem? What else can I do from my place to help resolve it? It can't be like one person pushes their chair forward and you just say, whew, thank God I'm not on that one. Because that's not going to help either. That's this collective as a team responsibility. Everybody has to step in individually so the team can succeed. So proactive, number one. The second part of this, though, is you have to be able to think not just in your organization, but around the table. And that takes a certain mindset and willingness to kind of engage in areas which you're not comfortable with. I do think there are a number of people who have an accountability mindset in one scenario, like I will deliver what I want to do. They won't play their numbers games. They will really deliver you what they know, but it'll be in the areas they know they know their stuff. They know what it takes. But as soon as it goes somewhere where they're not so sure, then they think it's just irresponsible to promise things there, because how would I know? And the problem, I think, as your teams get more senior and you have more complex responsibilities, that won't work anymore. Because there's too many things in the middle, which are not clear. And then all of us have to have some courage about, how do I step into areas where I'm not so sure how it's going to be done, when it's going to be done, and say, I'm going to go help figure it out. Not promise things that I, not promise things willy-nilly, because I don't know, but I will step in and have courage to be out there. Second is verbalizing personal ownership. So as a team and as individuals, we need to say that this is our problem to solve. We have identified it now. It's our problem to solve, and we intend to solve it. And that's because when we step forward and say we're going to do it, that means that the rest of the company knows we're in. And if we step forward and say we're in, we're going to help solve this, that means that everyone who works for us also now is tied into the solution to solving the problem. And let me just paint the opposite picture. When one group says, hey, we're going to solve this problem, and another team member says, I don't really see that being the right thing to do, or I'm not in for that, and therefore doesn't verbalize their personal support for the solution, what happens to their whole organization? They're not in, none of them have their oars in the water. All right? And we see that, sometimes. We see if one ABO is off trying to solve this problem of growing market share, but the BU doesn't think that's a good focus, they don't get as much support and resources as they need. Right? And that means it's not going to succeed, right? Probably. So verbalizing personal ownership, it's not only the individual standing up and say, I got it, but it's also the others saying, we're part of that solution too. We're going to help lead the change for this solution. I believe in it. I believe in this problem we're solving, and I believe in this solution, and I'm going to be part of fixing it. It's really, really important. So quiet support is not nearly as valuable as noisy support for the big issues. That's what the behaviors I'm looking for. And sometimes if you do this proactively and you verbalize on it before you know how to do it, sometimes you may not make it. So of course, has to be true that if you don't succeed in every case, that would be acceptable. Otherwise, no one's going to do it. So I do care about results, but I also recognize that I'm going to get better results when I get people stepping forward to solve big, thorny problems, even if they don't have all the answers. Third area is communicate openly with peers and colleagues. So we've used peers and colleagues both here because we're thinking of colleagues more broadly and your peers on your team, right? So the idea is inside the team and outside the team, we have to communicate openly. And let me talk what I mean about that. So when Lisa stepped forward and said, I'll lead this ERP problem for the company, the next question was, how are you going to do that? And what support do you need from me? And if she says, oh, don't worry, I got it, I'm good to go, that's actually not going to help because she doesn't got it. Right? This is a big, thorny problem. She needs help from a bunch of people on the team. So being able to be open with your team members about what you do actually have, here's what I've got covered, and here's what I don't have covered and I need help on, that's really important. There's an element of vulnerability in that, isn't there? Like, I don't have this covered. I don't know what to do here. Or if one of your team members is leading, that's leading their section of it, really isn't delivering, they need behavioral feedback. People need to say, hey, you said you'd support, and yet I noticed that you haven't put any staff on it yet. That doesn't feel like support to me. What's going on? So that stuff can't be quiet. It can't be that we won't address each other with those things. So there's an element of behavioral accountability here. Are we doing what we said we would do? And we have to be able to talk to each other about that. I can't wait for the boss or the CFO to find that. As peers or colleagues, we have to call each other on the behaviors that we're seeing. So proactive responsibility, verbalize, and then communicate openly. Where do I need help? Where don't I have it? Where am I vulnerable? Also, where am I peer feedback, colleague feedback when they're not delivering their behaviors aren't matching what their commitments are. Solution-oriented, I think this is probably one that you will have thought about before, but accountable people, they do give feedback, they do find issues, but they also search for solutions. They want to be part of the solution. So identifying issues, identifying problems isn't enough. By the way, it's important because otherwise you can't find the gaps. If your truth If you want to know the truth, you better be able to state where we're not. But just stating where you're not will not get you to the end. So it's a combination of stating where we are and where we aren't, and then saying, so what could we do about that? How could we move to solutions? And I guess the only other thing that I want to emphasize here is that sometimes when we get to problem solving, what I see happen in the team is each person kind of has a pet peeve or an issue that they want addressed, that they've thought about for a long time, and they're kind of seeing the problem from that perspective, like their individual perspective. You know, like the reason I think ERP needs to be solved is because they've been using too many of my staff for too long, and I just need my staff members back. Right? So yes, you're right, we should solve this problem, and really what they mean is, I just want my people back. So you're taking it over so I can get my people back now. That's not helpful. That's not solution oriented. That's solving your little problem right here. And what we need people to do in the team collectively is take on the full weight of the problem, not convert it into their little tiny problem. Right? This is a frequent behavior I see. So again, solution-oriented means I'm thinking about, I have positive momentum for change and improvement. I always seek truth and facts about where we are now in order to build a coherent and good plan. And then I'm also thinking to myself, I'm solving this for the company. Company first. The last one I want to think is about priorities. And I said we're guided by agreed upon priorities. And what I really mean by this is that once we have decided that we're going to solve this problem, we need to put resources in place to match the plan that says it's going to solve it. Not short it by a third, or poor boy the thing, or pretend like we're going to do all this stuff and never put any resources to it. But secondly, once we've done that, we have to recognize we may not have as many resources for all the other things we were going to do. And you guys recognize this behavior in us, right, in our leadership team, how we always have too many initiatives and never enough people. You just don't recognize it in yourself. Right? Those guys never figure this out. They always have too many things, too many priorities, they never give us enough money, but you never do that, right? And I do get pushed from both extremes, by the way. There are those, big thinkers that we just need to do more stuff. And there are those people who are very good on delivery oriented, and they just keep telling Tom, you just have to take things off the plate. That's their constant push to me. Just take things off the plate. There's too many things on the plate. I get it. I mean, I love it, except for the fact that the shareholders keep wanting more money. Right? They want good results, and I don't mean like they're essentially greedy. I mean they just want their retirement income. They just want their pension. Can you blame them? Right? So we have to be able to deliver results, which means we live in that uncomfortable ground between, sign up for every single thing and sign up for one thing and make sure you can do it. We have to live in that ground. And that means as leadership teams, we have to be responsible for agreeing our priorities, staffing our priorities, and when things aren't going to be staffed, we say we are delaying this initiative. We are not, or we are canceling. We are delaying or canceling, and here's why, and we communicate that clearly to people so they know not to expect that result. We're not going to work on that right now. And then we all work to that. So Jill doesn't work on her priorities and Steve Chapman on his priorities. No, we all work to the same priority list. And I would just say, just in full disclosure, that as CEO with my team, the couple times when I think I've failed on initiatives that have been important to me or not done as well as I would like, let's say it that way, it's because I didn't do a good enough job on agreeing the priority, agreeing what the staff was, and taking things off the plate that were otherwise going to compete with this priority. And even if I did at the start, I didn't follow through far enough, deep enough to see, did that actually happen? Did we actually remove that one? Did we move the people to the work? Did we make sure everyone had leadership as they should have? Did I really check that? And when I didn't, I think we didn't get as good results as I would have liked. So I think that's a really important one. So one of the questions is, what if personalized ownership, verbalized personal ownership means every time your boss tells you to take the hill, you say, yes, ma'am, I'm going. Because you want to be one of those people that Tom loves and wants to promote, which is personal ownership people. And again, I just want to remind you that courage without capability is not accountability, because you will not deliver the results. And that means that's not what I'm looking for. It's, the company doesn't get better because you're brave. The company gets better when we deliver the results. And you have to keep that in your mind. I used to have a CFO, Karen Batten. She retired, and favorite people in the world. And she used to say to me, Tom, she'd get to a place, she'd say, you've given me too many assignments now. And I said, well, Karen, we've got a lot to do. She says, Tom, there's too many assignments. I can't do all these assignments. Please take away 2 of these assignments. And she smiles, and she's very nice and warm and friendly. So of course I would do it. But but what she was managing is kind of her backlog. And what happened is, when you get to a certain spot, I'm demotivating. I'm just piling stuff on her with no way for her to see the end to it. And she was okay if I just kept the assignments on my paper, put them away, and then when she was done with those, I handed those 2 back to her. She was good with that. But she was good at managing me. And it made her successful and me successful, because she got a lot done by telling me stop. Stop. So I do think that accountability has a lot to do with making sure that you can actually deliver what you said you'd deliver, not just verbalizing personal ownership. That's kind of talking about the role of safety in accountability, in the sense that if I can't talk about what I'm concerned about, or where I don't have it, or like what's been asked, can I really be truthful with my boss, with my peers, etc.? And I think it does. I think almost everything of value in the team at some level has to start with trust, and to get trust, you have to have some level of safety. I don't think you need the ultimate level of safety you might need for telling your personal stories, etc., to be able to do anything in accountability. So again, in every case, but I do think you do have to believe that that I can challenge you as a boss, or I can say no to you, and it doesn't mean the end of my career, or that I no longer have a future here, or you're not going to do it. And I think for all of us as bosses, we have to know that. Like, if we don't create an environment where people think they can tell us no, or I'm worried that what you asked me for can't be done with the resources you gave me, that I will just hear yes, sir, and I'll get a lot of lack of delivery. That's what will come back to me. This is exactly why, Matt, I just said, despite my team's discomfort with getting rid of the results thing, I said, look, slamming my fist on the table and saying I must have results yields exactly the behavior that we're talking about. People just say okay, and then they don't do it. Maybe they have no way to do it. I mean, so we were just kidding ourselves. I mean, that's the sad part about it. We were just pretending. And all of our slamming is just nothing but pretending. So I do think that it has to start with safety, in the sense that I need people to tell me, be honest with me about what they can achieve and what they can't achieve in their AOP and all those things, or else I just have no chance of getting to the level of performance that I want to get to. So yes, at some level, it all starts with safety. It all starts with creating an environment where people can tell me the truth, whatever the truth is. And that means you need to, as a leader, you have to be able to show vulnerability, and you have to be able to show your willingness to be told you're not doing something right, or you've asked too much, or that your great idea isn't so great, or whatever. And it's fundamental, absolutely fundamental. So your question is, about accountability is, are you also willing to be the person that stands up and takes the hit if it doesn't happen? If are you going to disperse blame or push blame, or are you going to accept the responsibility when things don't happen? And I would just say that I definitely see accepting the consequences or apologizing for mistakes or as a good example of accountable behavior. And the reason I think so is that there's nothing that turns you on to the urgency of addressing these issues than having be the one to say, I blew it. I didn't deliver for this customer. I think the more often we're able to push things to other people, the less urgent we feel about doing a better job. So I think talking to customers openly about where you let them down and why makes you focused on not letting the company do that again. And I'll just give a personal example. When I was my kids were young and I was a father, my wife wouldn't want me to come home and from work and take care of the children because they basically were wearing her out. By 6 o'clock, her head was screwed in the ceiling because the kids are driving her crazy. And so I was making commitments to get home, and I would be late sometimes. And I remember sometimes, giving her the reason, I got held over in a meeting, but it's a third party implication. Somebody held me over. And I remember thinking about work-life balance and deciding at some point there that if I don't say I didn't make the decision to leave on time, that she would eventually hate the company. She had actually verbalized a few things about how she didn't love Cummins because they always made me late. And I realized that that's not the right trade-off for me. So I started to say, I left late. I said I would be home at 6, but I actually stayed and talked to Thad for 20 more minutes, and so I'm 20 minutes late, and I apologize, and I won't do it. And of course, remarkably, you know what happened? I started getting home on time. Because now it's my fault. I was accountable. In same company, same boss, home on time. So I really believe what you said, that verbalizing ownership for results turns you into a more accountable person. The reaction that you mentioned, Fiona, about someone signs up and you go, phew, this is really normal, right? Because we are all kind of up against it, frankly, trying to balance our work, our life, all these things together, and especially when something sounds really horrible, you're like, I'm really glad they took that. And if you're close to it and you could have maybe thought you're going to take it, feels good that someone stepped up and take it, and you're grateful and you feel a little bit of relief. And so I think that's a normal reaction, and that's. But I think what you're getting at is what are the techniques of the team and the leader to say that's not going to be acceptable for me. So one of the things that I think is really important is to ask the person who took it to come back and say, what help do you need from this team? Because I think members of the team are often willing to give help, but they haven't been asked. And the person who took it maybe feels like, well, I took it, I got to figure it out myself. Or I'll go ask them one by one or some other, but they're postponing the help part. So I think setting up a process where they have to come back and say, tell us what help you need. And it's not a throwaway comment. Like there is a scheduled time for you to say, here's my plan and here's the help I'm going to need. And I also think making sure that the entire team gets educated on what the issues, trade-offs, resource problems, et cetera are, because differences in knowledge also cause problems of commitment on the team. I hope what you see in here is that this is still a performance ethic-based accountability definition. One of the things sometimes people come away from this discussion with and say, oh, I love that accountability definition. It's more comprehensive. And some people think, oh, I hate that. It's kind of too soft. It means we're not holding people accountable for results. There's a lot of words in there, but are we still accountable for results? Yes, we are still accountable for results. Absolutely. The way that we get there I think, is not as simple as you gave me a plan, you made your plan, or you didn't. Because I believe that that doesn't have anything to do with reality in our business. Some businesses it might, it just isn't with ours. So please hear this as from somebody who cares deeply about results. This, results are what this is about. But the way that I think we get there is through these 5 behaviors, right? That's what I think. And it is a stronger or a higher expectation of leaders and team members in terms of their behaviors in the team, than it is just attitude. It's not just about attitude. It's about behaviors as well as attitude.